Hello, I'm Viktoria Austin and this is Shadow Talk. In this episode, we focus on purple teaming, a security assessment that combines both blue teaming and red teaming. In the information security industry, red team and blue team are very well-established concepts, but more recently, a new and arguably more collaborative process has emerged, purple teaming. So joining me today to discuss this concept is Eliza May Austin, CEO and co-founder of that security company, as well as Richard Gold, Director of Security Engineering at Digital Shadows, and James Chappell, co-founder and Chief Innovation Officer at Digital Shadows. So hello, everyone, and welcome.
Hi.
How is everyone doing?
Hello.
Peachy. All going very well, thank you.
Great. Well, Rich, I'll start off with you. You lead the purple teaming exercises at Digital Shadows. So what draws you to purple teaming?
Purple teaming is pretty interesting as it allows you to really get into the guts of how your organization responds to actual attacks. I think very often it's the case that enact defenses without really understanding what you're protecting against. And when you work together with a team which is actively attacking your defenses, you can see where things get detected, where they don't get detected, where they are prevented, where they don't get prevented. And it really challenges your assumptions about how things actually work. It's very easy to get kind of caught up in, well, I've deployed this, I've deployed that, I've deployed the other. And you kind of assume that everything's working as you intended it to work. But when you test it for real, then there's always something which doesn't actually work the way you expected it to. And that's always a surprise. And yeah, that's what I've enjoyed about it.
Great. And JC, you kind of have the perspective from a kind of blue team, red team exercise. You have a lot of experience in this area. It's my understanding that you're the author of the Bank of England standards for threat-led penetration standards, CBEST.
I'm one of the authors, so there was a whole bunch. There's a whole bunch of people who got involved in that. But I guess it was quite interesting. I looked at sort of the role of threat intelligence in security testing. That's quite interesting. There's some things that went really well with that process, and some things where we've learned some stuff along the way. And hopefully, so it's quite interesting. All my experience has been red team and blue team, and I think it's a good opportunity to see where purple team can make the difference, because I honestly believe that is the way we should be, the way we should go.
Great. And then Eliza, you set up that security company in February 2019, if I have that correctly. So Could you just touch on what your business does?
So we literally do purple team engagement. So we run two services, purple team engagements and building security operations centers. So for the clients that are really immature, from a cybersecurity perspective, we build their SOC for them and their security, the whole security, if that's what they need, but mainly just secure operation centers. But the key bit that I'm really passionate about is building purple team engagements. So we go in and we basically make the most of the red team and blue team and bring that all together and do assessments based on their most likely attackers, the most likely threats, things that are most applicable to their environment and to them.
Yeah, I really like this just straight off the bat. That's just like such a nice encapsulation of what's so important is like what's likely to be like the biggest concerns that you have, rather than, I mean, it's so easy in security to everyone gets caught up with like latest, greatest nation state stuff or whatever takes your fancy. But at the end of the day, if it's like ransomware from some commodity threat group is the biggest risk for your organization, purple teaming can really help you dig that out and see how you perform against that.
You're so right with that. I think there's a really big problem in cyber defense, in particular, where everyone's kind of preoccupied with what's in fashion and what everyone else is doing. And really, a lot of the time, if you're a manufacturer, what's applicable to you isn't applicable to someone that maybe is just a retail company and doesn't build anything. Or banking, for example, you've got things in place there like CBEST, for example, like JC just mentioned.
So every incident response you see these days where it's perhaps not been... First of all, two things happen. Companies say, we take your security and privacy really seriously, which annoys the heck out of me, because the reason you got breached was because, as we've discussed in this podcast many times, the reason you got breached in the first place is because you didn't really pay that a lot of attention. And the second one is the attack was really sophisticated.
Oh yeah,
like it was a 16-year-old in Ireland.
So it's the
Nobody wants to like come up front and just say that, go, actually, you know what, we didn't really take it very seriously, and we just kind of got trashed by some like bunch of kiddies.
Advanced persistent teenager.
Yeah.
Well, don't you think that that's quite an interesting paradigm, that there's, a lot of people will say, oh, script kid is this, script kid is that. But then as soon as they're compromised, they'll say it was an advanced attacker, because they've had no respect for what the script kiddies are doing. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, tooling advances, right? And there is some really, really nifty security tooling out there. And even in the hands of someone who's moderately unskilled. But I think in most cases, it's usually that people didn't pay attention to the basics, or the fundamental pieces. Just, we've seen it so many times with every breach. It's like they didn't patch, there was misconfigurations, the person who was supposed to be on call had the wrong phone number in the rotor, and all those kind of things. Yeah. It's that accumulation of very small mistakes or oversights that just build up into this huge, garbage fire.
And so what kind of role does red teaming play in relation to blue team and red team? I think we've touched on all the teams, but how do we kind of make them collaborate?
I think that purple kind of brings out the best in blue and red. So a lot of the time we can work in environments where the day-to-day job of a red team and a blue team is gamified, which I think has proven itself not to work. And I think that purple team sort of it kind of just highlights the fact that we're all working for the same company, right? Whether you're an external third-party provider or you're internal, we're all working for the same company. The end goal is to make the company, the infrastructure more secure, the processes work better. And purple teaming kind of gets you all in a room together. What we do at that security company is we will have me or my colleague or someone else that we bring in if we've got too much on, as the sort of purple team lead, and then we'll have a red team and a blue teamer, whether they're internal or external or not, it doesn't really matter. And we'll work through a scenario and a template that we've built specific to that company. And I think basically as a purple team, you're just acting as the glue to what should already exist. So if you are a company that only has, you have an internal red team, or you just have a SOC, or you don't really have both, or you have one or the other, you've got half of what you need, in my opinion. And purple teaming is basically coming in and saying, let's actually make this work and make this work for you.
That's really interesting. So I've seen a lot of red team, blue team engagements where the blue team, so the red team does their bit and then they throw a bunch of stuff over the wall. And then the blue team picks it up and then sort of, we could have spotted that bit there and we didn't. There's some broken controls, and it's done in a very staged way. So you have the attack bit and then the defense sort of wash up. And for me, that was sort of, I got a bit frustrated with that. So what you've just described is much nicer, because you're also saying, well, you're doing it all at the same time. Yeah. You're comparing notes. But there's really something that came up a lot when we were looking at sort of resiliency in financial sector was the red team didn't want to be told too much, or they didn't want like privileged information of the inside. Do you run into that at all? Yeah,
and I think that's an ego sort of thing, if I may say that. If not, who cares? Sorry. I think that's just stems from the nature of someone that spends their free time as a ethical hacker and trying to break things. They want the adrenaline rush of actually managing to do that on their own, and that's fantastic. And that's the day-to-day business as usual job of a red teamer, in my opinion. In the middle of a purple team exercise, I want you to be doing what I want you to be doing. I want you to be enacting out the actions of maybe an advanced persistent threat, maybe an organised crime gang. Am I making up words? And if you can't get on board with that, then I really don't want you in that environment. That's what that is for. It's not a replacement for a red teamer or a penetration tester. It's simply a supplement to that whole ecosystem. I
think that's a really good point. I think that also a full scale red team in the sort of truest sense of the term, where zero knowledge, black box, external team, come from the outside. I think you've got to be in a really strong place in order for that to really provide you with value. A lot of people, I think, do it because it sounds cool and it's kind of trendy and it's got a fancy name and all that kind of stuff. But I found that continuous assessment of your security controls by this collaborative process is so much more valuable, at least for as much as I've seen of the networks that I've looked at, because there's so much that can be done in that way that's not addressed by a red team. And James, to your point about, just throwing it over the wall and kind of hoping for the best. And, it creates those really, really tight feedback loops. So when you're attacking something, if it doesn't work, like you throw out an exploit and it fails, If you send out a phishing campaign and nobody answers, But if you're a defender and you've got, a firewall, access control lists, whatever kind of control you've got in place and it's not working, it's very hard to really know that it's not working. But with a purple team, immediately. So the red team do something and right. So now we've sent that email, that phish, and you go, well, I didn't see anything. And your feedback is much, much more immediate and much stronger. And it's much, the sort of signal has much higher fidelity, so to say. I found that to be something which is really, really good for helping the blue team improve. Which, as you say, is like the goal is we're all on the same team. Yeah. They're all on the same team. And we're trying to improve the company. And that, I think, is the real essence for me.
Yeah, if you're a red team, you're not a malicious actor that just happens to have a pass to the building. You're part of the company. And I think sometimes that's lost, which is just bizarre. And as well, there's a lot of hidden costs from if you just go and hire a pen tester, which that has a lot of value. I'm not going to lie, that has a lot of value. But if you you hire a pen tester, the price is X amount a day, you have them for 5 days, fantastic. Right, but there's a lot of hidden costs in that. So there's the hidden cost in the fact that the blue team have had to deter away from business as usual in order to defend against what that provider is doing, all the while possibly acting as a smokescreen to, something that's real that's happening. And they've also then got to go through change control. They've then got to remediate. They've then got to retest. They've then got to action anything that came out of retesting. So there's a lot of costs, and a lot of the time the incident response and the security operations center cost isn't applied to the cost of hiring a pen tester. If you have purple teaming, all that is accounted for. So it might the expense might be a little bit more, but at least you know where you stand.
That's a really good point.
You're sort of saying it's much more sincere. Really, you're sincerely testing.
Yeah.
You're not trying to do a test and get the highest score. You're trying to be more secure at the end of it. That's the goal. So
yeah. I think that's the appeal. And
I think it's easier to get that with purple teaming than with sort of the classic red team, blue team. I think you can do that. Absolutely. Of course you can. But I think that's much harder to achieve and is much harder to achieve for most organizations. Whereas this, setup that you just described, Eliza, is that gives you maximum value straight off the bat. Even if it's not, and that's what I like is you can do it even with something really simple, just by saying, we're just going to run this test and then does it work? And if it doesn't work, or you get caught, you don't get caught, that knowledge is so valuable.
It comes down to who's doing the testing a little bit though, right? So if you, I don't know, say I'm a fictitious, I'm James Chappell Financial Organisation, and I've got I've got a regulator coming to talk to me about my security, and I know I'm going to get tested. So they said, right, we're going to test you, and I'm like, oh, holy cow, I've got to pass this test. This is really important. If I don't, I'm going to be in deep water. So. And that kind of sets you up in a slightly different sort of situation than you might do as if it was the IT department testing the IT department, because you've got aligned interests if you're two people in the IT department. Whereas if you're a regulator and an IT team, you're probably not as aligned. So
it's more adversarial?
It's a slightly more adversarial relationship. So could you still purple team in that situation?
Well, I mean, I don't think I'd really apply purple teaming to that sort of situation. So if you're talking about a CBEST scenario where certain criteria are met based on a known time of the year or whatever, and you're gonna go and do that, I think purple teaming more applies to it's intelligence led. Yeah. So, well, no, I mean, like, it's an intelligence-led adversary emulation. So if I know that I've got 3 most likely attackers, which are X, Y, Z, I know that their TTPs are this, I know that they're aiming for this in my company, therefore I'm going to enact all of these different scenarios from the inside outwards. I think that's a completely different thing. I mean, I'm not sure. Maybe I just understand you wrong.
No. I think, no, I'm not. So CBEST wasn't a purple teaming exercise.
No.
Just to be really clear. It was always this was kind of, I was quite interested in purple team because I thought there were some opportunities to.
Oh, you're so
for
right.
For that to bring that to the process. So what happens, and I'm not talking on behalf of any specific institution here, but you come up with some scenarios. You'd say to the testing team that it makes sense to try and align your activities with these scenarios. Quite often the testing team will go, well, we're going to do what we were going to do anyway, because we're going to use phishing, we're going to use a toolkit, we're going to try and get some sort of rat on the system and trying to extract some data. They're like, well, I'm going to do that anyway. So what's the difference between, a less persistent attacker and someone who's got 6 months to spend attacking me? And actually quite often the answer is time and resources, right? So
I think resources are quite an important thing to kind of consider here, because we touched on the fact that some organizations are quite immature. Cost might be something to consider with purple teaming, red teaming. So is purple teaming a cost-effective measure when it comes to an immature organization?
So I think it's not very sort of appealing to talk about money, but at the end of the day, if you know what you're spending, you know why, you know where it's going, and you know how long an engagement is going to last. For me, as someone that might go and deploy that in my environment, I would find that more cost-effective, because I don't want to think, oh, I'm going to have to spend another few £1,000s on another pen test next year, or 6 months later, and then a year again, and then another 6 months. At least with this, with my understanding of it, what we do is we go in, we cross-train as we're doing the purple teaming, in the hope that they don't need us anymore. And we've got that slogan on our website, we've done a good job when you don't need us anymore. So we want them to be able to, next year, do their own purple teaming in-house. Brilliant. And not have to go and hire anyone for it.
Yeah, and I think that also touches on that. A lot of teams don't have that expertise on both sides, and if you're a red teamer, understanding the blue side makes you a better red teamer. If you're a blue teamer, understanding the red side makes you a better blue teamer. And I think that gets you away from that thing where you're just deploying security controls because it's best practice, rather than understanding I'm deploying this security control because, as you mentioned, like the most likely threat actors, these are their most common TTPs. That's what we want to defend against first, and then you walk down the list of other things, but just having that understanding of what you are protecting and what you're protecting it against, I think purple teaming is so good for helping you get to the heart of that.
So is it fair to say there's different definitions of what purple teaming is?
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, I've come across people that will say to me, oh, we don't need your solution, we already have purple teaming. And you're like, oh, great, explain to me what you're doing. And they basically explain a theme.
Right.
Okay. So we've got everything monitored and we react to it. Okay, that's not purple teaming.
That's quite blue, isn't it?
It's very blue. Or you get like a very red interpretation of it, that we're testing everything, we're basing those testings on threat intelligence. That's fantastic. What are you doing with that information? Realistically, a lot of the time, it's going in a nice report, sometimes vague because they want to come back next year and they want to do more work for you. And that report's going to the CISO and it's sitting on a drive or it's sitting somewhere, and then eventually the blue team will get round to having access to it and then they'll act on it. This is literally someone from the red team, someone from the blue team, and a purple team sort of person. So yeah, I haven't really come up with a name for the actual purple team person, but maybe we'll just call them that for now on, purple team person. And you'll sort of work with blue, work with red, and then the purple team person will sort of oversee what's happening. We produce templates based on industries. We manipulate that based on the particular client. Maybe there's a religious background there or a political sort of affiliation, and we take all that into account as well. And these things become very, very bespoke. And I forgot what the original question was. I'm very sorry.
No problem. I think you wrote a blog in August, so just last month, and you described, or you called the blog purple team, like you're preparing for war. So what kind of key practices or best practices would you
that I had so much fun writing that, because it really led me to explore like the strong points and the weaknesses of Churchill and Hitler and various other people. And I genuinely think that we have, if we're thinking about it at worst case scenario, we're in a healthy space. So if we're thinking about how someone can attack us, how someone can take advantage of the things that we've got in place as a function and not as a vulnerability, we're in a good place. And I think you have to deploy that same train of thought to war. So just for example, let's go back to like the Second World War. So I don't want to bore anyone if no one's interested in war history. That's just me. But so Hitler, for example, he created an army that was very dependent on gadgets and transport that was run on oil. So he needed fuel and he didn't have any. There was none in Germany that he could take advantage of. He didn't account for the fact that Britain would put a blockade in any fuel being delivered to him. So he was left in a really inadequate perspective. He'd put loads of preemptive thought into creating all this ingenuity before the war, and he put like loads of talent was there in creating mechanical machinery. But then when it actually came to the war, he was like, oh crap, like I can't use any of this stuff that I've built. So then it became like a big spiral down sort of scenario for Germany. So there's a lot of things that we have to think of in a very strategic way. So as well as having to think of what we need right now, we have to defend ourselves right now from active threats, and we have to make sure our blue team are trained. We need to make sure our red team are in a position to really mimic what we're going to be facing. We also have to think, what are we going to be facing in 6 months' time? What are we going to be facing in a year's time? And I think purple teaming has to be at the forefront of that. It can't just be what's my most likely threats now. It needs to be, where's my business moving from a delivery perspective, from a financial perspective, and how is that going to affect my place in the market, and how is that going to affect my vulnerability status?
I like that. I like the business oriented approach in particular. So there's one of my big good takeaways from the whole CBEST thing was the concept of a critical economic function in a business. So you're saying, I'm going to make money, and I make it by, I don't know, opening bank accounts or selling shares or whatever it was. And you look at all the systems involved in delivering that economic function, and that would give you a scope to focus on. And then that scope would be the thing that you'd run the test on.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think I like this because it focuses on what the company does. Because usually we focus on, stuff. Like, oh, I've got a laptop, or I've got a fleet of machines, I'm going to care about that, or I've got my server farm, or I've got my cloud infrastructure, or I've got my mobile endpoints. But thinking about it in this term with that, and I also really appreciated that from CBEST too, thinking about it in terms of what's the critical assets of the company, of the business, that focuses things in an often very surprising way. And that's of course what threat actors are doing, right? They're not interested in, I see you're running or Windows workstations. That's interesting. It's like, I'm interested in your money, in your data, in your people, in your reputation. And that's the things that I'm interested in as an attacker. So, that's I think a really important shift in perspective.
I guess you neatly highlighted supply chain security in the example you gave. Right. So that was a perfect example.
I think it's something that's really interesting, and I'm sure you guys have experienced this before as well. You can speak to someone that represents a company from maybe a C-level even, and you'll have a discussion with them about what their sort of crown jewels are. And I need to come up with a better term for that because I really don't like that terminology. But, the thing that if that dies, the company dies with it. A lot of the time, they're very confident in their response, but they don't actually get the answer right. And I might be sounding like really like up my own butt saying that, but just an example is I was speaking to one potential client, and it didn't go anywhere because I didn't agree with them. And I asked them like what they thought that, or what, from their perspective, what is their crown jewels? And they said, PCI, PII data, and that's correct in a sense, and a lot of the things they said were correct. But I remember I distinctly remember having a conversation with them where I said, yeah, but you've got 30 factories across Europe that are dependent on industrial control systems. But they didn't see that as a crown jewel. They didn't see that as the main thing that anyone would go for. But if I really wanted to cripple you, that is what I would destroy. I wouldn't go for your PII data in your databases.
That's a regulatory answer, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. No, exactly. And I think that's something that we have to get away from in order to really embrace purple teaming and really make the most of it, is getting the C-level away from the answer of regulation and saying what they're supposed to say, and saying what actually that is needed in order to really defend their environment. This
is great. We're back to compliance versus risk management. Yeah, it's like everyone's, hey, I've ticked the box. I've got my certificate. Everything's awesome. That's not how it works. The paperclips in the drawer are beautifully secured.
I love that analogy. That's brilliant.
So Eliza, or anyone in the room, I'm an organisation. I'm coming up to you guys for some advice on purple teaming. What systems would you start testing with a purple team approach then? Kind of in reference to the client that kind of you were speaking to earlier.
Well, that is entirely dependent on that client, entirely dependent on their environment, their infrastructure, the business, the people they serve. So yeah, there's like all these different factors to sort of account for. But what I like to do is start with the identified areas that we would say are very critical to that company, that if they died, the company died with it, people lost their jobs, whatnot. And start with that and work your way out. So, if I am on position A, and position A is like the Queen of England, like if you kill her, it's massive. That's really bad analogy. I take that back. That's terrible. I'm really sorry. Sorry, Queen. Like, oh my God.
She is a regular listener to
she's like, she's going to write in.
We're very, very...
With a quill.
Every week is the same.
We're very sorry, Mom. We didn't mean it.
So your queen bee, so to speak. Work outwards from that. If I could get information from that, how would I get it out? And then go in the reverse and just see, a couple of times what you can do each way, what you can manipulate along the way, and all the time using a sort of a very structured but also kind of vague alignment to the framework put in place by the people that have done those attacks before. So the attacking groups. I know a vague and alignment sort of sounds a bit contradictory, but what I mean is following the template that we've produced, but at the same time, if you see anything along the way that they would take advantage of, go for it.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier about the military history background, and so I was recently reading about Napoleon and his victory at Austerlitz, and that was unbelievable, like strategic brilliance. And the thing that was really highlighted about his approach is exactly what you mentioned. He had an unparalleled strategic vision married with an unparalleled attention to detail. So I think that fits very nicely to what you're talking about, that you need to know like what the view of the business is, where the business is going, and all of that kind of good stuff. But that has to be working in concert with a really, really detailed understanding of how threat actors operate and how offensive security works.
I've got to say, I'm learning a lot about military today. I didn't think I was going to learn this much about the military. This is cool. Just wanted to pick up on, so it's quite interesting sort of the strategic and the tactical there. One of the observations that when I was working with security testing teams, and we said, look, here's a scenario of someone who's going to attack your business or the business, the target. They sort of say to us, well, we're going to, don't tell us what to do. We know what we're doing, sort of thing. Is that, I mean, you're doing the red team, that security company is doing the red team bit internally. So presumably you don't say that to yourself. You don't tell me what to do. But equally, you're relying in some respects on the skill of the engineer who's, he or she is going in and discovering infrastructure, then making decisions off the cuff as to where to go next, especially when you get through a perimeter, for example. You go through a perimeter, you don't know what you're going to find on the other side. Once you're through that, you're going to start to go in different directions. Obviously, you know how the attacker behaves, but you're not going to know the direction in which to go beforehand before you go through that perimeter. So how do you get around some of those? Like you can say, APT, whatever it is, gets through using these 5 steps, but actually by the time you got to step 2,
if they're not available, what they're going to use.
What are you going to use? Yeah.
So what we do is we work on an associate model. So if for example we go to a client that doesn't have an internal red team and they are completely dependent on third parties, if they want to bring in their own third party, that's great. If not, we will supply a red teamer. Right. So I don't want to, as the purple team person in that scenario, I don't want to get sidetracked into this is shiny. Let's give it a poke. I don't want to get in there. And I understand the sort of the appeal on that. And I think it goes back to what we were just saying. So you really need to, if you understand what the business is, you understand what the business function is, and you understand how it can break, right? If you bring in someone with a talent for penetration testing and also incident response, I think that you can utilize that to your advantage. So
it's role play.
Well, it is in a sense, but at the same time, you are actually doing the deed. You are actually your pen tester is actually. So I'll just give you a little bit of a rundown. So I might say, Viktoria, you're my red teamer, and JC, you're my blue teamer. So I might say, okay, go to section 1.B. So I want you to try and navigate from the box you're on to this box via this method. And then you might say, I can't do that. There's security controls in place. So I'll say to you, JC, okay, did that flag up anything on your controls? And you're like, no. So, okay, we'll stop. And then we need to go and have a look at why that didn't flag up. Okay, is there some use cases or some controls that need altering to be put in place? And then, the next thing might be, okay, I'm on this. I've just dumped some credentials. So I'll say, JC, did you see that? I did, actually. Okay, so there's a misalignment there between someone getting on the box and someone managing to dump credentials, and you've got a bit of a blind spot. So that's what we'll go and work on. Do you know what I'm saying? So by the time we've left, that blind spot is covered. So
you're actually, it's just quite interesting because there's a big thing about cadence and timing here. So again, a lot of the things I saw were there's a 4-week engagement. You do this for 4 weeks, then you do this for 4 weeks, and then one thing passes over to the other. And what you're saying is actually it's better to have someone embedded on an ongoing basis on both sides. The dream is to have someone on both sides all the time, permanently informing each other of what's going on.
When I was working in the SOC, I would have absolutely loved this. Like if someone came in and said, okay, we're going to do this. I want you to align yourself to this, take this home, read it for a few days, gen up on it if you want, whatever. I would have got training whilst I was working, doing something that really protected the organization that I was working for. I would have been all over that, like completely all over that.
So you're being given carte blanche to go and tinker with stuff. That's great.
Well, yeah, I think it definitely upskills internally. And really obviously I want people to hire that security company to do it, but really you don't. If you're not a very mature company and you don't have a budget, you can do this. You can experiment with this and see if it works for you for free. I wrote a blog post on that as well, and how to sort of experiment with purple teaming and not spend any money. And I genuinely think that it can really make you more mature and iron out some really significant processes really quickly.
I completely agree. And having spent 3 or so years doing purple teams now, I just could not imagine doing security any other way. Like if, I would be parachuted into another organization to do security there, it would definitely be something I would do. I can't imagine not doing it. Like without that continuous assessment of your own controls, you're flying blind, really.
But IT departments aren't like that, are they? So they're like I want to change control note for everything. I want to have a meeting once a week before I could even, admin privileges. Well, that has exactly 2 people in the company that get those. And you sort of, it doesn't lend itself naturally. And I'm not saying this is right, but it doesn't lend itself naturally to that. And I'm guessing, Eliza, you're going to have to overcome some of these barriers when you sort of get in there, right? And
yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right on that. One of the things that we will say before we even go in somewhere, so the initial meetings is we need to meet with change control. We need to get them on board. And then we'll meet with change control and we'll say like, this is for the benefit of everyone. And we may need to have meetings with you once a week to fast track things through. You can do it. You've just got to sort of know where the hurdles are, and you've to kind of break them down. Get
the right people bought in.
Yeah, you're right, exactly.
And I think that's a wrap. It's been a great conversation. And I think, what are the key takeaways that you'd recommend to our listeners?
So I think from my side, the points about security culture, I think were really interesting that Eliza was making about how do you persuade people to actually get on board with this. So as somebody who's fully bought in, I kind of don't often think about how I would actually persuade somebody else as to the benefits. As to me, they're so self-evident because I'm just in the weeds all the time. So that was an interesting thing. And yeah, just from my side, how fundamental it is to assess your security controls with this approach on a regular basis.
How about you, JC?
I really like the point about economics. So I think everybody imagines you're going to go and get a really expensive consultancy come and do this stuff for you. Actually, you can do it very economically. I think that's really cool. And then obviously the big learnings around military history. That was awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Learn something new every day.
I think my key takeaway would be before you go and spend any money, very much echoing what JC just said, before you go and spend any money, really experiment with the people you've already got and tools you've already got, and just try and make the most of them. And if you find that you aren't getting any further, then maybe go to a consultancy for purple teaming. But purple teaming is a mixture of what you've already got. If you've already got those internal teams, make the most of it.
So while you're the CEO and co-founder of that security company, you also wear another hat. Eliza is the founder and director of Ladies of London Hacking Society, an offensive and defensive technical security meeting for women in cybersecurity. So could you tell me a little bit more about your society, Eliza?
So Ladies of London Hacking Society, or LLHS, I like to call it because it's a bit of a mouthful, is literally it's a technical environment group that sort of been put together in London for any woman that's interested in cybersecurity or already working in cybersecurity and wants to break out from the other sort of tailor-made women's events that are non-technical and learn penetration testing, learn incident response and cyber defense. And we've actually branched out. So we've got Sheffield opening up early next year. We've got Norwich that's opened up this year as well. So we've got a lot of different regions that are interested, and the ultimate aim is for it to go global.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, I think that's a very great target to aim for.
Thank you.
And kind of I guess what drove you to set it up?
Well, oddly, I really enjoy going to meetups. I enjoy going to other people's meetups. So I would go to vendor events or just different things that were happening in and around London. And if they were a mixed event, I would find I was the only woman, which was also quite a weird feeling. The atmosphere didn't really align itself to what I like. So I like an environment where I can just ask any question, and even if it's deemed a stupid question, I want to be able to ask it anyway. And I don't want anyone to be like, oh, that's a really stupid question, you should already know that. But I found that I got that from mixed events. So I started going to women's only events, and they were so untechnical and so downtrodden that it was almost embarrassing. So you'd go there and there'd be someone on stage saying, the first thing they'd say is, you don't need to be technical to be in cyber. What a stupid message to send to women. Seriously, women and girls, the world is going to the more technical extremes in terms of just how we live our lives. Just going shopping, we need to use a computer in order to go shopping. So we have to be technical in order to be at the core of what operates those different things. And it was very much like, these are the things that men do and these are the things that women do. And then it'll start talking about soft skills. And it really wound me up. And I went to different women's cybersecurity meetups time and time again, and it really sort of annoyed me. And there is a place for that, don't get me wrong. And some of them, they were really nice environments, and I met some amazing women. But what I really wanted to do was just set up a technical meetup for women to learn and share technical knowledge and skills. And that's literally the core of it, and that's it.
And what are the barriers to entry? So say if I have a non-technical background, but the organization promotes technical skills, or it wants to increase people's technical skills, how do you approach that to someone who's not so technical?
So I'd be better off just describing like what we do. So like if someone turns up, they have like a 15-minute brief lecture on what we're doing that month. So let's say that we're doing weaponization. So we're learning how to weaponize code. We give them an explanation on what they're doing. They sit with other people that have got experience, or other people that maybe don't, whatever. And they just do a follow along step by step. Me or someone that I've put in place will stand on stage, plug in on a big screen and go, okay, literally type this, literally click this button, and explain why I'm doing each thing at each single stage. And they'll learn as they go along. They get support from a company called Immersive Labs, where they can go home and they can like redo all of those labs in their own time. And they very much learn the technical aspect in a very macro sort of self-directed pace. So it's very, very concentrated. So we're not talking about using a framework to go and exploit an application or a system. What we're talking about is one of those tiny aspects of that exploitation journey, and we'll learn a different thing every single month, and we'll teach that. And even if they're a not technical person and they don't want to be technical because it just doesn't interest them, let's face it, there's plenty of people like that. They can better align themselves to having a conversation with technical people. So we get a lot of women that are in sales or recruitment that will come along because they just want to be able to have better conversations and understand the industry that they work in a bit better, but they really enjoy the job that they're in and they don't want to move from it, and that's totally fine.
Our industry hasn't done very well when it comes to gender diversity, or indeed in other types of diversity. This seems like a great way of kind of encouraging better participation. Are there other initiatives that you found doing similarly good work?
I mean, there's a lot of meetups and a lot of groups all over the country that are doing amazing work, and the research that's coming out of there is brilliant. But in terms of, having a room filled with equal men and women, no, there isn't anywhere. Mine doesn't do it either. We're predominantly female. We do have some men that come along if they contribute as well. But no, I mean, it's impossible. You can't have equal men and women because there isn't an equal amount of women available to fill those roles or to attend those meetups. And that's fine. And for me, the most important aspect of diversity is the diversity of thought. So I don't care if I accidentally hire a room full of white men. If they can challenge each other, they have different thought processes, different beliefs, and different different interpretations of things, and they can really go to town on each other. That's really important to me. I don't see much benefit of having, filling all these different non-existent quotas and having more women, more people of colour, more people, of different varying disabilities. If they all have the same opinion on everything, they're going to sit in a room and agree with each other. So for me, what I'm doing with LHS isn't from a diversity and inclusion perspective. It's more from just creating a space where women can explore their technical abilities rather than anything to do with inclusion.
So we spoke about penetration and purple teaming today. What can we actually action from this?
In terms of like LHS, we teach penetration testing and we teach defense. So like I said before, it's at very sort of macro level. So they're learning. Is it macro or micro? I'm not sure.
Macro is like the grand scale.
Oh,
micro is
okay.
Like the small details.
I was totally wrong then. It's very much at the micro level. So they're learning the details of penetration testing in order to truly understand the defense. And I think that's the mindset of purple teaming, is that when it comes to purple teaming, you really want your defender to want to understand the attacker, and you really want the attacker to understand what the defense is putting in place and how they're going to discover what you're doing, basically. And that sort of brings it full circle and makes any environment more secure. And if we teach security from the starting point of understand your adversary, whether that's from an offensive or defensive perspective, we're at a very strong position in the attack or defense process, whichever side you align with.
Great. Thank you so much, Eliza. I think that's a really nice way to end the podcast. So I'd just like to thank everyone, especially Eliza, for joining us today.
Oh, thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks a lot.
Been a really great chat. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.